Welcome back to our Carinine, in which we're discussing the rule of law here in the Bahamas. At the break, we were looking at the equipping of the two sectors, both the criminal side and the civil side in the Supreme Court. And we were looking at the fact that there is the option for us to increase the number of judges on the civil side to cope with the backlog. And we will have 10 judges on the criminal side. And how bad is the backlog on the criminal side?
It's very, very significant. Judges are now setting matters, criminal trials into 2018. And we are hoping that that paradigm will change. The additional judges will enable us to reschedule and bring forward matters that have been set out in that far away. The whole object of the exercise of increasing the resources of the court is aimed at ensuring that we try criminal trials as quickly as is humanly possible, and that eventually we get to the point where within 1 calendar year of being arraigned, a person is tried.
Well, that's an ambitious target.
It is an ambitious target, but it is doable, and that is the one cure for the high incidence of the granting of bail to serious offenders or persons accused of serious offenses. It's intended that we reach the level of efficiency that exists elsewhere in the developed world in particular.
You mentioned the whole question of bail. This is something that has been highly discussed in the general public. People are very concerned about, at least it is alleged that persons who are on bail are involved in crime and other. Well, and the whole granting of bail seems to have caught the attention of the general public.
It has, with some justification, because a large number of the persons admitted to bail have gone out and reoffended, committing armed robberies and even murder. So that there is a social outcry, and we in the government feel the pain of the general public on this issue. We have put our money where our mouth is, in that we have provided the courts with ample resources which will now be deployed by them to ensure that the system works more efficiently. And in working more efficiently, the incidence of bail should be affected. And when I say affected, reduced.
Reduced.
We are pleased that in the month of January that there are no bail orders granted. And in this month, only one, and we've appealed it. So we are seeing the effects, the benefits of the investment which we've made in the last 2.5 years. And while it's a short period, until now we weren't in a position to have the courts operate out of the new facilities. And that was not the fault of the government. One is faced with old buildings and renovations and the challenges which arise in the normal course of things in renovations.
But you are now at a point where
we are at a point now
the
where
facilities are available.
Where the facilities are available, and I might say about the facilities that particularly the so-dubbed Swift Justice temporary courts, they're outfitted with the latest technology. So we have the capacity in those courts to have video conferencing so that witnesses who may be at risk don't have to actually come to court to give evidence. and anonymous witnesses will be offered that type of protection. So these are qualitative technological usages that improve the quality of the service which is now available in the Supreme Court. And we intend to also use that to save money. We spend a huge amount of money transporting witnesses from different parts of the Bahamas to other parts of the Bahamas, and we should save several $million just by using the technology that has been purposely provided in the court facility.
And it's that is generally practice across the Commonwealth.
Well, that is, it is, yes.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of our legal system, as those improvements are made, what about the attitude of Bahamians towards crime generally? Because I had an interesting episode this morning on the way to Mass. I was signaling to turn right, and all of a sudden a police car just overtook me. I was about to turn. No siren, anything, just hurrying along, and they totally ignoring my signal to turn right. And they said, now if this is how the police drive, I mean, one of the hazards of being on the road today is we have so many bad drivers, people who have very little respect for law and order on the road.
I suspect that once the courts are functional at the optimal level of efficiency, both the Supreme Court and the Magistrates Court, we will see that the public will appreciate that when you commit a crime, you're quickly processed, and you may be convicted, and you, if you are convicted, you face a fine or imprisonment, and that affects people's behavior. At present, it is sad to say, but a lot of people commit crimes feeling that they can do so with impunity. And it's only when you have a system that functions optimally that you're able to affect people's behavior so that there is respect for the rule of law.
Well, I thought that some of that should have been mitigated by the performance of certainly the investigative side of the police force as doing fairly well, because their record of arrests for crimes is fairly high. I mean,
it is, but let's take over the last 3 years, the murder rate has been over 100, and the police detection rate is averaging now about 55, 56%. So that's 150 cases that have been just added to the diary for the courts. And that's just murder. That's not armed robbery and other offenses. These people are entitled to be tried within a reasonable period. The court knows that it's booking out trials into
3 years
2018. The likelihood of granting bail in that scenario is fairly high. So that, you know, the police then are faced with another problem. They have detected a crime so far as they're concerned. The culprit has been brought before the court so far as they're concerned, but the courts have released him. That person then goes and commits another offense. And the cycle goes on. So they feel as though they're spinning wheels as opposed to dealing with completely new matters. And that must be a demoralizing reality for persons who are working hard. And when I say that, you know, for a large period of time, police officers have been working longer shifts than usual. So they're entitled to feel aggrieved when they see that the system is not working in the way that they believe it should, and which most right-thinking Bahamians would believe it should.
Yes. So, in your opinion, the provisions that the administration has offered should reduce that area of concern?
I think that area of concern should be radically affected, and that we should see a huge improvement in the throughput of trials in the system. And incidentally, our conviction rate has gone up with the new efficiencies introduced by what we've been doing with Swift Justice. We are now in the mid-60s as a percentage, up from the 40s when we took office in 2012. So the raising of the standard of performance across the board augurs well for law enforcement generally, and would give the police the comfort of knowing that their partnership in the process is working.
But generally speaking, the role of the members of the police force in the maintenance of law and order is something that I think needs to be spoken to, because very often, for example, dealing with this issue of the murder and the number of murders, it seems to me that people have an unfair expectation that, for example, the increase in the number of policemen and the increase in resources they're provided with, that should automatically lead to a decline in the number of murders committed.
Well, the difficulty is predicting when a murder is going to take place. And you can separate gang activities from other situations in which crime occurs. The police are unlikely to know that there's a domestic dispute in the house of Mr. and Mrs. Jones. If Mr. Jones or Mrs. Jones picks up a knife and stabs the other, and the other person dies, there's absolutely no way that the police could have anticipated that that murder would have occurred. That murder goes on the statistics, but it is not something that rational people would attribute to the police as being preventable. Now, if that household has had reports to the police station of domestic violence, and social services has built up a profile, there may be an argument that more could have been done. But again, the police are stretched. They're fighting gang violence, and they have to prioritize their resources. And we as citizens have to cooperate as best we can to ensure that they're able to get the most out of the resources which they have at their disposal.
But my concern is that it seems to me an unfair expectation that the police should be able to prevent the crimes from occurring.
Well, I agree with that to a point. I believe that the police ought to be developing intelligence capacity in much the same way that Mossad in Israel is able to do so, and to be able to predict through that intelligence the likelihood of some event that is about to take place, and then to take preventative steps, arresting the persons for conspiracy to commit murder, which is better than actually arresting them after the murder has been committed. But we have not yet reached the intelligence capacity to have the expectation that they will be able to do that 9 times out of 10.
Good, well, we must take our final break for the evening at this point.